All right, good morning, boys and girls. It is Wednesday, April 15th, I think. I wanted to touch base with you this morning. Happy Wednesday. We're halfway through the week. I hope that you guys are feeling okay. I did send you a check-in, a Google form that you guys can fill out for me. Let me know how you're doing. Focus on how you're feeling and what I can do to help you out as we navigate this crazy adventure together. I was just talking to my family at supper last night, and I had said we have been home for an entire month. We came back from Florida a month ago today, and it was the final weekend of our spring break, only to find out that we were not actually coming back to school. So that was kind of a crazy point to talk to my family about. All right, in chapters 13 and 14 in Walking with Miss Millie, we learned the very sad story of Miss Millie's son and how she named him James after her brother, and that when he was 5 years old, he died because the hospitals were also segregated and had white and black hospitals, and as a black family, she took her son to the hospital that was the closest, which is a white hospital, and they did not help her, and he died in her arms. In chapter 14, we also met Pam again, and Pam cracks me up as a character. She's super funny. Like, if she covers her ears, she can pretend that she's deaf, and even though she doesn't understand that finger talking or sign language, she is finding ways to communicate with Eddie, which is phenomenal, and I think that she's trying really hard. So we'll see how that relationship develops. As we move on, I want you to think about how Alice is really someone very special for Miss Millie. And I want you to think about what her role to Miss Millie is as a friend. And I also want you to think about how Miss Millie's stories are shaping Alice and giving her some perspective of Rainbow and Miss Millie's life. I also really want you to think about how her stories are changing you. Because when I read this book the first time, I had a really, really huge change of heart thinking about Miss Millie's life. And it kind of made me realize that maybe I need to gain some perspective too, and realize that the things that I complain and bellyache about are not really very important and not worth all of my energy of complaining. And I could be a part of the solution and not a part of my problem, right? So as we continue on, I want you to think about how these stories could maybe change the way that you think. All right, we're going to get started with chapter 15 and 16. It is only 15 pages, about 15 pages, so it should be a pretty quick one. Here we go, chapter 15. "You been in a fight, Alice girl?" Miss Millie whistled through her teeth when she saw my scraped knee, elbow, and chin. "Yeah," I answered, standing at her back door. "I got in a fight with the road. Looks like the road might have won that round." She smiled, but not a big smile. "You okay? We don't have to walk if it hurts ya." "So this must be Alice," I heard a voice yell from inside Miss Millie's house. This pretty much surprised me. I only pictured Miss Millie with Clarence and me. I guess I didn't really think of her having her own life and friends who stopped by. "Now, this here lady is Miss Frankie," Miss Millie explained when her friend came to the door. And I remembered that Miss Frankie was the lady on the other end of the party line whose gossip got me into Miss Millie's in the first place. "Nice to meet you," I said, remembering my manners. "Pleasure is mine, sweet girl. Pleasure is all mine." And her voice was twice as loud as Miss Millie's, and she was twice Miss Millie's size, too. The difference in the two friends' size made me smile. Turning back to Miss Millie, I offered, "If you have company, I can come back later." Miss Millie laughed. "Oh, Miss Frankie's not company. She just stopped by to drop off my cake pan. Course she only returns my food containers hoping I'm gonna fill them back up for her with more food." And she winked at me and smiled at her friend. Miss Frankie opened her mouth in an exaggerated expression of shock. "Huh," she said. "Cake needed more salt if you ask me." Miss Millie laughed at her friend who blew her a kiss. I'm just trying to help you get that recipe perfect. And before she left, she added, sure have a hankering for some sweet potato pie if anybody cares. Miss Millie shook her head and turned back to me, eyeing my cuts and scratches again. Maybe you should rest today. I was touched at her worry on my account, but promised I'd be fine, and we started on our usual walk. It's funny how much I started to look forward to my walks with Clarence and Miss Millie. Being with them just seemed natural, but I wondered if we made as funny looking a pair as Miss Millie and Miss Frankie, and if it even mattered. Lately, I'd been really missing my friend Linda. We promised each other we'd write. I wrote her twice, but so far, there weren't any letters from her or anyone. Maybe it was time to think about making friends here, since Grandma didn't seem to be getting any better. Pam was nice, the way she helped me with my bike accident and everything, but I don't know if that made me her friend. Plus, she was closer to Eddie's age. Was there even anyone here in Rainbow to be friends with? As we walked past the church, I looked over at Miss Millie and said, can I ask you a question? And she looked straight ahead as she answered, free country last I checked. I smiled. Last week you said you didn't like going to church. Miss Millie snorted and turned toward me. That again? I thought I told you what I meant. No, I know about the going to church thing, but I was wondering, what do you mean about some people being all unchristian-like? Are there lots of mean people in Rainbow? Alice girl, Millie shook her head. The whole world is full of mean people. But it's also full of nice people too. That's the important thing. I guess that was true, but it wasn't telling me what I needed to know. Who's been mean to you at church? I didn't hear Miss Millie laughing, but I could see her smile, so I figured she was okay with my question. Well, she kind of looked over her shoulder to see, like whoever she was about to talk about might be sneaking up behind us. There's this one lady. Never you mind her name, but she sings in church every Sunday. Every Sunday she's up there singing about what a friend she has in Jesus. Of course, she's singing off key, but each Sunday she's up there singing and smiling and looking out at everyone like she's the right hand of the good Lord himself. I had to hide my own smile at how worked up she was getting. She continued, and after pretending to be the good Lord's right hand on Sunday, on Monday she spreads gossip that would make you think, or would make the devil himself blush. Does she gossip about you? Woo-wee, Miss Millie laughed. Reckon I'm her favorite subject. Miss Millie went on. You see, years ago, there was a dear old white lady named Miss Ruth who lived in the house I live in today. I used to be her maid. She was always real good to me, and when Clayton took sick a year before he died, she let us move in with her. Let us move into her very house. Can you believe it? I didn't know if Miss Millie was wanting me to really tell her if I believed it, but I did. I hoped I would be nice like that if somebody needed my help. And with all that mean white people I knew Miss Millie met in her life, I was real glad to hear that there was at least one nice white person in her life. She walked on, and she continued her story of Ruth. About 8 years ago, Ruth died. She had no family, and she left me her house. Of course, some of the neighbors, like that one lady who can't carry a tune in a bucket, were none too happy a colored lady was now their official neighbor. But there it was, writ out plain for all to see in her last will and testament. So after 80 some years, I had me a home of my very own. Miss Millie shook her head like she couldn't believe her luck. Yes, sirree, Ruth was a true true friend. God rest her soul. Miss Millie stopped walking for a minute, so I figured I had to stop in order to get my soul blessed by God. I stopped too. I noticed Clarence sat down, maybe even lowering his head like he was saying a prayer. When the moment of blessing was over, Miss Millie started walking again. Yes, sirree, after Miss Ruth died, that there lady didn't like me living in her neighborhood at all. And I think that there lady had an actual thought so infrequent that when she did get one, she had to share it with everyone around to make sure she didn't lose it. So I stopped going to church most Sundays. My head moved up and down like I understood, but I still had one question. I thought you told me yesterday that you were too old to let things hurt you anymore. And that's when I saw her whole face smile. She reached out and touched my shoulder. Oh, Alice girl, truth be told, you're never too old to be hurt just a little. But if you're lucky, one day you'll be smart enough to quit putting yourself in the situations that hurt you. By then, we were back at Miss Millie's backyard. She asked me to wait a minute while she went in her house, and I bent down to pet Clarence, who rolled over, showing me his belly so I'd rub it. A few rubs later, Miss Millie was back. Wanted to show you this here. Miss Ruth gave it to me. She opened her hand, which held a little pink and tan shell. Ruth told me it's called a scallop shell. See how it fans out like that? I nodded. Ruth said that it represents all the different journeys everyone takes in life. But see how it all meets up at this point? And she pointed to the top of the shell. That's to show we might all come from different directions, but hopefully we all end in the same place one day. That is real nice, I said, surprised by my voice. It was almost a whisper. That Miss Ruth is real nice. Miss Millie nodded as she put the shell in my hand and folded my fingers around it. She sure was. She patted my hand. She sure was. Chapter 16. Pam must have loved being called a hero, because after my mama called her that, she started to come over pretty near every day. After the first couple of days, Mama didn't even have to ask Pam if she wanted to stay for lunch. We just knew she was going to eat with us. In a short while, Pam found a way of communicating with Eddie. It was less like sign language and more like charades, but it kind of worked for them. Most days she'd start by playing with Eddie, but eventually she'd end up playing with me or both of us. One morning, she asked about the tire swing on the ground. Well, why don't you hang that thing back up in the tree? I shrugged. It's too heavy to lift. If we lift it together, it'll be easier, she said. Like if we were a team, always trying to do things together, yet somehow it didn't sound wrong. Eddie dropped his plate to help us try to lift the tire back up to the chain, but it was still too heavy. I signed to Eddie, go get the wheelbarrow in the shed. He disappeared for a few minutes and came back grinning at his accomplishment, pushing the dirty wheelbarrow. Good! Pam clapped her hands together like that was a sign. I shook my head. No, you say good like this. You put your right hand up to your mouth and move it straight down to meet your left hand. Good. Pam tried it as Eddie nodded his head and clapped for her. I know a sign, she shouted. Thanks for teaching me that one. I smiled at her excitement. That's pretty much the way you sign thank you, too. I know 2 signs, Pam said. Then she and Eddie stopped telling each other good and thank you. I rolled the tire into the wheelbarrow while Pam held it steady, and Eddie pulled the chain around the tire to connect to the chain from the tree. We did it! Pam yelled, signing good over and over and over again at the tree. Since Eddie wasn't one to celebrate too long, he picked up his plate and in a sign everybody knew, waved his hand towards himself to tell Pam to go with him. I hopped on the tire swing to test it out and watched Pam explain through her motions that Eddie's bus needed to stop at another tree. Eddie stopped and Pam went to the tree acting like she was buying something. Then she licked a make-believe ice cream cone and handed another make-believe cone to Eddie. It was silly, but I kind of wanted her to make me a make-believe cone too. When I got tired of watching their game, I headed back to the shed and Daddy's letters. Pam must have eventually tired of the game too, because a few minutes later she joined me. Eddie had no interest in the letters from Daddy, but Pam sure was interested. So your daddy wrote these letters to your mama? They're so pretty. I don't think my daddy ever wrote anything pretty to my mama or to anyone. At least you get to see your daddy all the time. But that actually made her look sad. Yeah, he's around all the time. She looked back at the letter in her hand. Why did your daddy leave after writing these pretty words? Well, he wrote these words a long time ago, but he's coming back soon. I'm just getting things together to show him when he gets here, to remind him of these places he loved, and Mama. Does your mama know you found her letters? No, and it's a surprise for her too, so don't tell her, okay? Pam squealed with excitement. I love surprises! And I'm really good at keeping secrets too. I mean, last week I saw my brother break the front window of our house when he threw a baseball, and he told me not to tell no one, and I never told no one. Well, I never told no one until like right now. I couldn't help but smile at her before running to read again the letter poem I was holding. This one is about the schoolhouse and the bleachers. Is that close by here? Pam squealed again. Yes, I know where that is. It's not far from here. I can show you. I can show you right now. She motioned for Eddie to come as I yelled into the house that we were going for a walk. We passed the church and the street that led to the park and the wishing well. Then Pam led us to another road I hadn't been on yet. This one dead-ended into a building that had a sign out front that said Rainbow Junior and Senior High School. The combination school looked to be as falling apart and lonely as the park and the wishing well. And the whole town. Ta-da! Pam explained like she was pointing to something other than a rundown old school. I tried to muster up some pretend approval for this place. Thanks for bringing us. Are the bleachers here somewhere? Of course, silly! And Pam slapped Eddie on the back like he was in the joke. Eddie saw her laughing and started laughing too. The bleachers, of course, are in the back by the football field. Come on, I'll take you there. When Eddie saw the lines of the football field, he smiled like he had found the most perfect road for his pretend driving. He started driving his plate up and down those lines while Pam ran behind him as the perfect passenger, moving everywhere he moved, stopping every time he stopped. I walked over to the sad-looking bleachers and tried to imagine what they were like when my daddy put his arm around my mama here. I sat down and opened up the letter poem Daddy wrote about Mama when they were there so long ago. On the schoolhouse bleachers during the football game, a chill wind warmed when I say your name. With the sweat dripping down my back and the heat of the sun on those bleachers coming through my shorts, I think it was hard to think of chill wind as it was to think of my daddy writing a poem for my mama and her name. If I squinted, I could imagine Mama sitting next to me on the bleachers, smiling her smile. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see Daddy sitting there next to Mama. And before I knew it, I had tears in my eyes. Shaking my head, I tried to blink away the dang wetness in my eyes. I was hoping to find something to represent the bleachers to show to Daddy when he came, so I started to look around. Under the bleachers, I could see trash and rocks and a couple of things that were moving. Still, I noticed nothing looked special enough to stir up a memory that I needed stirred. And then I saw it. A little ways down from where I was sitting, there was a triangle flag on a stick, and as I got closer, I could see the flag was red and white and had the letters RHS for Rainbow High School, I guessed. As I bent to pick it up, I noticed it was a little dirty. Actually very dirty, but I could wash it in the sink before giving it to Daddy. I sat on the hot bleachers, holding the dirty flag, while my brother and Pam zigged and zagged on the football field. As I watched them laugh and communicate in their own made-up language with the words good and thank you being signed as much as possible, I realized Rainbow was becoming a home for Eddie now. And it scared me that it was starting to feel like a home for me too. I felt guilty, like I was betraying Daddy. All at once, I couldn't take a deep breath. It was like an elephant was sitting on my chest, a big old elephant named Rainbow, and that elephant would only move if Daddy came back. I was counting on my collection of stuff to help with that, but then it hit me. Maybe my collection was also to remind me of him. Was I forgetting Daddy? Daddy's laugh? I couldn't hear it anymore. Daddy's face? Blurry. I knew I had to get him to come back as soon as possible. I reached in the pocket of my shorts and pulled out another one of Daddy's letter poems. I read it a couple of times, not liking at all where it meant I had to go. But I didn't have a choice. And that is the end of chapter 16. All right, so in the 2 chapters that I read, I want you to think about, let's see. We're going to go back and think about Miss Millie and think about the lady at the church and the neighbor, because she was in the neighborhood. And why do you think that people didn't think it was right that Miss Millie got the house from Miss Ruth? And also, I want you to think about how Alice is starting to feel like Rainbow might actually be her home, and the relationship of Pam and how she's interacting with not just Eddie, but also Alice, and how that is changing things. So talk to me about those things. Talk to me about the change of those relationships, and also think about how Alice is feeling now, maybe realizing that she's trying to save her memory of Daddy. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you guys have a really wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow.